Welcome to Beyond Referrals, the podcast exploring how trust, growth, and client relationships in financial services are evolving in the digital and AI age. I'm your host, Emily Armstrong. Let's dive in.
Hello there, and welcome back to Beyond Referrals. This is a great conversation and very practical with my new friend, Sarah LeBlanc, who is the Vice President of Strategic Marketing at LPL Financial. And she's been in that seat for over 17 years, which is crazy. And we talked about this because at the beginning of her time with LPL, she was seeing social medias come up. So there's a lot of similarities between that time and now. And her insight and perspective was really valuable for financial advisors. And I'm excited for you to hear this conversation. So there's some success stories of advisors who've leaned into social media in here. And what I loved most about this conversation is it was very practical and just very encouraging and simple. Ultimately, I think the message here is start somewhere and just keep it simple. So a few nuggets you can expect from this conversation. One of my other favorite things was talking about beautiful constraints. And so Sarah has such a great story in here about a very famous scene in Indiana Jones that was a total accident. And it's a great analogy to this idea of beautiful constraints. So advisors who are in environments where they can't do everything they want, they might have only certain platforms they can be on. And how do we use that as a gift to create opportunity? We talked about compliance. That was a fun topic. And Sarah's formula for success for advisor marketing is visibility plus credibility equals opportunity. And so she also goes into a bunch of really simple examples to start leaning more into social media so that you don't wake up, a year or more years from now wishing that you did these simple things sooner. So you're going to love this one. It's very, very practical and insightful. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Sarah LeBlanc.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Today's guest is someone who I recently connected with on LinkedIn, and I knew that I wanted to invite her on the show because her perspective is uniquely valuable for listeners and this audience navigating marketing inside compliance-heavy institutions. Sarah LeBlanc is the VP of Strategic Marketing with more than 25 years of marketing experience, including 17 years at her current company, LPL Financial. Throughout her career, she's helped thousands of financial professionals navigate an evolving marketplace, staying competitive with a particular focus on the impact of digital marketing and online presence. A sought-after speaker on these topics, Sarah is passionate about helping advisors leverage digital strategies to win new business and strengthen client relationships. So this conversation is going to be focused on how do we use marketing in compliance-heavy environments and seeing the constraints that you're working with as unique opportunities. She speaks from this tension from a place of deep knowledge and experience. And if you're an advisor in an enterprise-level firm like Northwestern Mutual, Mass Mutual, Edward Jones, Charles Schwab, or any of the other institutions with a compliance department dictating how you can show up online, this episode is going to be amazing for you. So, Sarah, thank you so much for being here and welcome to Beyond Referrals.
So happy.
I'm excited. I've been looking forward to it. So, for context, yes, Sarah and I have met once. We talked a little bit about this topic of coming on the podcast. And I just was really excited ever since then to have this conversation. But before we go into the meat of things, Sarah, tell me more about you, how you ended up at LPL, like your career, what you're focused on, and then we can go from there.
Yeah. Now, as you said, Emily, 17 years at LPL. So that's been kind of the bulk of my career. But before that, I spent about 4 years working at the San Diego Union Tribune. So more on the media side, talking about marketing on behalf of the newspaper and the newspaper's website. And that was when social media was just up and coming. So I got to learn about it firsthand from that point of view. And then prior to that, I actually started out my career for the first 3 years or so at Capital One. And this is going to date me, but this is when they launched the What's in Your Wallet campaign while I was working there. And it was really cool to have a front row seat. So they literally, this is the olden days where they put up an easel and they literally unveil the new tagline in front of the audience of marketing professionals at Capital One and saw What's in Your Wallet. for the first time. So that was a really cool experience too. And as a result of all of that, I'm just super passionate about everything social media. So thinking about how we use media for marketing, and that all brings me to how I help and support our.
It's amazing that one liner from Capital One's like so iconic. Like there are very few brand lines that you'll just remember forever. And that's for sure one of them.
Yeah, it was a cool experience. It all comes from focus groups, by the way. So that's another lesson. Always turn to your clients and customers for information on how to market and brand your practice.
What came up? Did you like, can you speak to what came up in those focus groups to make that tagline?
Yeah, so Capital One back then was not necessarily a household name, but we were, some of you might remember, we were sending out a ton of direct mail. And so people were getting the credit card, but thinking of it as a MasterCard or a Visa and not understanding Capital One was the brand attached to that MasterCard or Visa. So we were asking folks to recall, like, what are you carrying around in your wallet? Nobody said a Capital One card. They said MasterCard or Visa. So when we asked them to actually take out their wallets and look through their credit cards, a lot of people were surprised to find they really did have Capital One credit cards and that brand in their wallets. And that's really where it came from.
Wow, that's incredible. And then, yeah, I think of Jennifer Gardner and she's so fabulous and fierce and her saying it. I'm like, she's such a queen. That's a great tangent. So then okay, this is so crazy. So 17 years at LPL, like focused on marketing specifically that whole time. Can you take me through your time in this industry and like what you've seen? Or I mean, that's a super open-ended question, but I kind of want it to be.
To our topic for today too, because I always say I have not been with LPL because for this long because I don't like change. Because if you don't like change, LPL is not for you, and neither is marketing, right? Because every day marketing is changing and evolving, and I've gotten a front row seat for that at LPL too in terms of like how is marketing evolving? What are the opportunities coming at us? To advisors, how do we coach on the opportunities that come up? So I've been at LPL long enough to see social media become an opportunity for our advisors to participate in. And then new platforms come up like Instagram, which we now allow our advisors, and things like client testimonials and Google business profiles, all these new things, which aren't so new anymore, right? But over this time, they've been new. And so I've gotten to witness how LPL specifically looks at those opportunities from a compliance lens. How do we enable it for advisors whenever possible? And how do we help advisors? I've seen a lot of change in those 17 years for sure.
Yeah. Do you have an example or a story to illustrate that concept that you're speaking about of social media becoming an opportunity for people in this industry?
Tell a story of one of my favorite advisors. His name, I won't say his name, but he is one of my favorite advisors because we connected probably 10 years ago at this point. That point in his life, he was a one-person operation in a small town in the middle of the country. And unfortunately, his wife was having some health issues. And so they were having to spend a lot of their time in another state. And so he was concerned that he was going to lose that connection to his clients. If he would sit down with literally at the coffee shop on Main Street in his town. And so he was looking for opportunities to stay connected, and he landed on social media, which he called his new media strategy. And really, at the end of the day, the goal was stay connected. So he launched Facebook. A lot of his clients were retired. So Facebook and actually Twitter at the time was what he focused on, believe it or not. So started to write blogs, to create like funny memes for his social media, and just share that out and distribute it to his clients who were following him there. And in 2 years, he grew his revenue 51%. And just from doing that, just in a time when he was hoping to just maintain the business. And he was completely blown away by the impact that social media specifically had on growth. Came from wallet share. Like he had very close relationships to his clients, but they had assets he didn't know about. And they were basically just diversifying because they wanted to obviously be safe and smart with their assets. But the more they got to see Mark's content, it increased their trust in him, and they started handing over more of their assets. And I think that's just such an incredible story and example of how sometimes we underestimate the impact of authentic communication on those platforms.
That's amazing. I want to get your perspective on compliance too, because you being in the seat that you're in at a large institution like LPL, I'm sure you're interacting with compliance. And, from my experience, when I was working within Northwestern Mutual, it's like it sometimes feels like there's always a clashing of heads between compliance and anyone who wants to do marketing in this space, right? So if you could like speak to on behalf of compliance, like what is their goal? What did they want? Because I often talk to a lot of frustrated advisors about compliance, like where they feel like they can't do a certain thing or they just feel so restricted every time they try something. That's often the sentiment I have. I should have a compliance person on my show, by the way. So, from your perspective, I just think you would have a unique lens on that relationship and that dynamic from being in the seat that you've been in for the past 17 years at LPL.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I think, to put my compliance hat on, I really think they're just trying to keep you safe, right? They know the rules and requirements best of all. So they just want to make sure that they're helping you navigate those in a way that you can go out and market your practice, but with that compliance mindset so that you're reducing the risk to you and to the broader firm as well. But something you and I talked about when we connected before, one of my favorite concepts to remind advisors about is called a beautiful constraint. And so sometimes I think, when we have certain restrictions, it can feel frustrating. Like I just want to give up and not participate. But if you take the other mindset and lean into those challenges and you think, okay, well, let me think creatively about how I can operate within these restrictions, it can sometimes lead to even better, more creative outcomes than what you would have been able to land on had you never. And the story I shared with you before, it comes from one of my favorite movies of all time, Raiders of the Lost Ark, right? So there's this famous
Mhm.
story where there's supposed to be this scene where this guy comes out with a sword and he's like gearing up to fight Indiana Jones. And Indiana Jones is supposed to take his whip and they're supposed to have this big choreographed fight scene. But unfortunately, the behind the scenes story is Harrison Ford got some kind of stomach bug or something and he wasn't able to rehearse. And so when the day came for shooting and Steven Spielberg's like, what are we going to do? You're not ready. He goes, well, what if I just shoot the guy? And so instead of the sword and the whip, he just pulls his gun out and he shoots him. And that scene is so iconic and has now made its way into almost every movie montage you ever see, where like at the Oscars or wherever they're paying like homage to the best movie scenes of all time. That one is inevitably in there. So great example of a beautiful constraint created something even better than what they had
Yeah. Yeah, I remember you sharing that with me in our last conversation, and I loved that visual. It makes me think about just like my entire life, like how can I implement that philosophy in all areas? I think it's such a human thing and a human way of thinking to like, okay, so let's say there's an advisor like in a walled off ecosystem where they might not be able to do all these things, right? But then they see these other advisors or teams or firms showing up online, showing up in social media, putting effort there, putting energy there, getting results. And then it creates that kind of mindset of like, oh, I can't do that. I'm not doing that. But it's like, but what are you doing, within what you can do? And so I think that's just like a human way of thinking that we need to be really cautious of and aware of. But along this idea of the beautiful constraints creating opportunities, do you have maybe another story or example of an advisor or where you're seeing advisors do this or where you're helping advisors lean into this that is an opportunity versus someone who has an independent RIA who has like all the architecture that they want and can do everything they want?
Yeah, and I will say at LPL, I feel like we have a little bit more opportunity than some other firms. So always I just add this disclaimer, putting my compliance hat back on, talk to your firm, find out what you're able to do where you are today. But almost every firm that I'm aware of has some opportunity and capability, like with social media. So you might not be able to go out, like our advisors can use Instagram, they can go out and share reels and stories and participate in that space. But if you're not able to do that, almost every firm has, some platform with social media content and guidance on how to do so compliantly. So maybe it's just simply sharing an article from a library of content that's been pre-approved and getting that out to your network. I think at the end of the day, just be as strategic with it as you're able to within the requirements and rules for your firm. And sometimes I would say just the key there is think of your audience. And I know we say this all the time with every marketing opportunity, with every marketing strategy, it begins with really understanding your audience and what's important to them. So if you have just simply a library of content to choose from, don't grab just anything and push it out there. Think about from this library of what you can share, what's the most relevant to my network? and how do I position that in?
Do you see advisors trying to do marketing without clarifying their ideal client or their audience first?
Yeah. And I think sometimes it's easy to, especially with marketing, we understand, right? It's not your wheelhouse. It's not necessarily something they're very familiar with or have a lot of time or want to invest a lot of time in. And that's something we at LPL are always thinking about. How do we bring you solutions and tools to kind of take some of that burden off of your plate? But certainly I see a lot of folks just saying, I'll just automate it. Right? I'm just going to pick a solution to set it and forget it that just pushes content out to my network. But remember that those solutions are pushing the same content out to every advisor, and every advisor's client and audience is seeing the same exact things. And that's a good example of like not thinking about it and just kind of letting it go on.
Don't even get me started on this. I actually, so the clients I'm working with, I advise that, so the pre-approved, pre-firmed canned content is like, it's fine, but it could damage your brand. So like I saw an example of this a couple of weeks ago. I won't say the institution, but, and you and I are marketers, so we can like see a little bit behind the curtain. Like we probably analyze and notice more details than the average person does. So I'm going to say that little disclaimer. But what it seems to me is like this institution has decided, like the boardroom conversation was, okay, we're going to go after like the Gen Z. Our social media is going to be very like real heavy, like millennials and Gen Zers. And, like I'm sure there's a whole strategy behind who they're trying to attract. And so their social media is all these like, they're supposed to be like funny type reels. And it's like, it fits for sure for a certain audience, but I'm seeing these pre-approved reels of like one was a millennial woman in her car with her husband, and it was like it was like a selfie type reel, and it was like my husband thinking about all of our expenses and our kids' college tuition and our 401ks, and meanwhile he has no idea how much money I'm dropping on my upcoming hair appointment, and the woman's like making this like cheeky face, and it's like cute, right? But it was posted on like these high level managing directors and these owners of very elite firms. And it's like a millennial woman being cute about her hair appointment. And I'm like, eesh, like, and that's probably because they just made the decision of what you're saying. I'm just going to automate this. I don't really care. But it's actually like, first of all, it doesn't really help you. It gives you something, some sort of presence, but it's not no one's engaging with it. And it's not like it's getting you clients. So yeah, talk to me about your opinion there. Is it better? Like, because I see the same pitfall of someone not wanting to do it, not wanting another thing on their plate, because advisors are very, very busy running these businesses. So what should the thinking be there instead of I don't want anything to do with this. I want to be in the game, but I don't want to be in the game. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And you bring up a great point about potentially damaging your brand or your personal brand out there with the wrong type of content. And so I have what I call Sarah's formula for success when it comes to marketing. And it's very
Ooh,
simple.
give it to me.
I think this is also another marketing lesson, but could be a life lesson at the same time. But I call it my formula for success, and it is visibility plus credibility equals opportunity. And it's very simple, but you want to think about being out there. That's the visibility part. You want to be seen. The more people who see you, the more they know you. But the credibility piece is really important too, because that's kind of what you're talking about. It's like, I want to make sure that what I'm putting out there matches my brand, is relevant to the people I'm trying to connect with, and is honest and real and helpful. And so if you think about all that you can pack into that credibility piece of it, those two things are what creates opportunity for your business. And the opposite can also be true, right? If you're not visible at all, someone else might get that opportunity instead of you. Or if you're visible and you're eroding from your personal brand with the wrong type of content, then you're going to potentially miss out on that opportunity as well. So you want to think about both of those components and the roles they play in opportunity for your business.
I love that. I love that so much. Visibility plus credibility equals opportunity. Yeah. What would you say to the advisor who is so credible, who feels so credible, who feels like they're the best kept secret, but they don't want to deal with the visibility piece? What would you say to that advisor?
Yeah, this is a good one. I have this conversation all the time, especially from advisors. This is my favorite but least favorite line that I get from advisors because I hear it all the time. So this is when we also at LPL, by the way, can do videos, short form videos, and publish them out on your social media. And anyone who's like wants to get in that space but doesn't want the visibility always says, I have a face for radio. And that's a line we hear all the time.
Heard that one. Yep.
I don't want to be out there. Or to your point, I just don't want to take the time to create that visibility. And I say, if you don't, who will? Who will? Because somebody else will. And I think what's really missing in our industry to a large extent is the people with the most knowledge, the most credibility, if you will, who've been in this industry the longest, don't have the strongest voice and
Hmm.
should. Because you have the younger people who are jumping into it more readily, enthusiastically, which is great, but they don't have the amount of experience and knowledge and stories to share and advice that our more tenured advisors do. And so, like, you're not just shortchanging yourself. I feel like you're shortchanging investors who are missing that truly credible advice you have to offer.
It's like one of the most kind of infuriating things, but I think it's the truth of today. The better marketers are going to win. And the like I love how you said that with the people who are the most credible, like if they get into this visibility game, that's huge opportunity for them. Who are you seeing? What types of advisors are you seeing more jump into this way of doing things versus the ones who are more hesitant and more like, nope, I'm just going to stick to doing good business. I'm going to just stick to referrals and I don't want to get into that nonsense.
It's been interesting. Like I was sharing the example of the advisor earlier who grew his practice 51%. He's not in the demographic you would expect. Like he's old, an older demographic, like more closer to retirement. But so there's exceptions to this. But in general, I would say it's what you would expect. It's the younger advisors who are looking to grow their business, or maybe even folks who pivoted into our industry from another industry later in their career and have experience with this from previous jobs, or people who maybe have someone they're close with, a spouse or a friend who's in another industry like real estate. And like, oh, my friend does all this stuff with social media and has all this success, and they have someone to learn from that they can then pull that knowledge into their experience. And frankly, Emily, that's a lot of women. Like women do really well in the social space because I think we're social by nature and more comfortable and confident in that space. So that's really what I'm seeing. But I think we need more participation.
Hmm. Yeah. Talk to me about how you see the blend of these kind of like social media and brand strategies and marketing versus like going back to the basics of you got to prospect, you got to do the activity, you got to make the phone calls, you got to get the referrals. Like how does the social media space create this new opportunity, but then how do we still make sure, how do you like see this business development emphasis as well? Because it's not like you can just be like, I'm going to go, our industry is still the handshake industry. It's still the trust industry. You cannot like, I've seen if some advisors kind of have this faulty thinking where they're like, I'm going to go all in on this content strategy. And then they're not doing like business activity. And it's like, well, that's not going to necessarily build your pipeline unless you're like a mega influencer. So yeah, how do you see those two worlds together?
Yeah, that's a great call out because I always like to emphasize we talk a lot, or I talk a lot, I guess, about social media, but it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It really is part of a broader strategy. So, creating that. Personally, I think meeting someone in person is the best way and fastest way to build a relationship. But then what do you do after that? So I think the biggest change is not, taking that away from it, but using social media and online presence to amplify it and to continue that relationship with that individual after you meet. Example, let's say you go to, it could be an industry networking event or some type of professional networking or even just a social event, and you meet new people that, hey, I'd love to have this person in my network. I might think of them as a prospect one day. Rather than just like the way we used to do it is like you exchange business cards and you maybe call them once or send them an email, and person keeps your business card, the one they need your advice. But nowadays, like go on social media, go on to LinkedIn, go on these other platforms that you're able to use and connect with them there. And that way, as you continue to share out content, you're continuing that personal connection. So you stay visible, you stay top of mind, and they don't have to search through their junk drawer for your business card when they really need a financial advisor. They know you because they know, and they know how to reach you because they could. So I think that is one really important way to think about it. And then, that's where I would start. Is just kind of remember that it is a continuation. And then also one other thing you talked about that I think is really important is referrals, because referrals, in my opinion, will always continue to be a really important part of our ecosystem because at the end of the day, someone's handing their money over to you. There's an intrinsic trust built in when someone you know and trust already has made that introduction and that connection. And so with that, I would say just remember, I think the stat is 91. Yeah, actually, I have the stat over to the side of my screen because I pulled some data in preparation for our conversation today. The stat is 91 of millennials trust online reviews as much as they trust recommendations from friends and family. So what that tells me is the way we think about referrals in the future is going to change. It could start with a professional or a personal recommendation rather, but then they're going to go online. So that's how all of it comes together and plays a role in it.
Love that. I agree with that as well. That's super interesting what you said. How the referral. How did you say it? It was so good. Like the way that referrals. Can you say that again? The referral is going to change.
So I think it's just we need to think about the way that we view referrals. It's going to evolve, right? Because we'll still get those personal connections, but the added layer is then they're going to go look you up to them.
Yeah. I read something recently that like somewhere around 50% of, I think it was the millennial generation, millennials and Gen Zs, but they don't even go to Google anymore or a website. They go straight to a social profile to look for that social validation. And I always tell my clients a blank profile sends a blank signal. And you're actually like going back to the visibility and the credibility formula, Sarah's formula of success. Like without that visibility, like you really kind of lose the opportunity, and that's just the world that we're in today. And it is different than what business used to be like and used to look like 20 years ago, 10 years ago.
Yeah. And I think too, if you want to make an analogy, imagine you're walking down Main Street and there's this financial advisor's office, but it's always dark and there's never anyone there. And then someone recommends them. You might say, no, I don't
You'd be
think
like,
so.
oh,
No, I know they don't seem active. They won't seem like they're actually doing business. So part of it is just like being active and showing that I'm still out there, I'm still relevant just through participation.
that's a great analogy. The one that I have said a couple of times is imagine you were given a stage and a microphone and a room full of your ideal clients. And you went up on the stage and you held the microphone to your mouth and you said nothing. You just stared at them. And do you think you're going to attract business that way? No. On the flip side, imagine if, and that's what LinkedIn is. It's like you're given a platform to reach your exact audience and they can see you. So it's like, what are you going to say when you have the microphone? And guess what? You have the microphone.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's how you use the platform, and it's not like going back to compliance restrictions, I feel like the advisors I talk to always want the platform they can't have on social media, so I've been asked a
That's
lot,
so true.
"Can I get on TikTok?" And I'm like, "Okay, we're not at TikTok yet, but in the meantime, you have a stage." To your point, you have a stage, you have a platform. How are you using it? Are you using the platform you already have the right way and the best way you can? And then we'll worry about other stages and other platforms.
I think that goes back to what I was thinking earlier of like, that's just such a human way of thinking. It's like we think that if we had something else, then it would like magically be easier or something or better. That's really, really good. Something that was going through my head when you were talking earlier is I want to hear from your perspective from like what you see in the field and your experience and your conversations with advisors. Let's call it the next 3 years. I feel like that's like close enough where we can still see the future, but still long enough for things to continue evolving quickly. Who gets left behind? Who really starts to struggle more in this industry versus who excels and who gets these opportunities?
Yeah, great question. It's very top of mind for me. We have our big conference coming up to LPL this summer, and I'm going to be talking about AI in one of our breakout sessions. And I think AI is a catalyst for what we're talking about and leaving people behind because it used to be, like I said, I've been in LPL long enough to remember when social media was new and not very many
Mhm.
advisors were participating. And so simply being out there was good enough, right? It was a competitive advantage. But now 85% of financial this explosion of content from just AI being able to generate so much of it and crank it out. And people are really starting to get fatigued from it all. It's a lot of content, a lot of it's AI, right? So you have to do more to what I call stalk the scroll, right? To get somebody who's scrolling through social media to pay attention to your content when there's just so much clutter. So in the next 3 years, that would be what I would recommend for advisors to think about is how do I differentiate my content and my voice from A, anything that's super generic, and B, anything that looks and smells like AI, because that is starting to your point about eroding trust at personal brand, it's starting to do that when people realize this is not authentic.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, it's like I think I actually would say this if you are just simply enrolling in the pre-approved content and you're like set it and forget it, that's actually hurting you more than it's doing anything because someone shows up and they just like it's like there's a message sent to that person. Oh, this person doesn't really care. Like, it's like, of course, that's not true, but that's what it tells people because the competition field is high now. Like, there's a high bar. And I have conversations on this podcast every single week. And selfishly, I love it because I'm learning so much from amazing people like you. But like, the one thing that keeps being said to me over and over and over and over again, and that I'm like seeing everywhere is this idea of the content needing to be authentic to do anything because of AI. Like even going as far to say as educational content is pretty much out because we have AI. So I like how you're saying that. And I'm going back to thinking about you uniquely and your unique perspective being in this seat for 17 years, like over all of these technological evolutions and like this industry. Like, what about this moment that we're in feels the same that it did 17 years ago when like social media became a thing? And what about it feels completely like a different game?
I think the same is that there's always something new. There's always something that we're trying to unpack, that we as marketers in this industry are needing to learn and then interpret and like teach our advisors, make sure that it's compliant and help folks take advantage of it, provide tools and solutions. Like I think that is the same. It will always continue to be the same as technology and marketing advances. But I think what's different is just before. So even when I started at LPL and social media wasn't a thing, we were still looking at traditional marketing. So I'm talking about cold calling, mail campaigns. And I'm not saying that still can't be effective, but they're expensive. It takes time to see results. And so, focusing on that, it takes a long time to even learn from
Mhm.
those tests, right? So the era we're in now, I think what I get the most excited about is it's because it's digital, it's practically free a lot of times to just go out there and participate and start sharing things and then learn very, very quickly what are people responding to? And you get that instant gratification in terms of view counts, comments, likes. And so you can very quickly start to understand what does my audience care about and evolve your strategy and your approach a lot more quickly. So that to me is the most exciting current aspect of marketing.
Yeah. So like these traditional marketing tactics, right? Of like direct mail or other, there's plenty out there. And for advisors specifically, like when I sit down with advisors or firms, their main thing is like, well, our marketing plan is what events are we doing this year and what client gifts are we sending in November? And it's like, okay, there's a lot more to marketing than just that. Don't even get me on my soapbox about that. But what are the most effective tactics worth someone's time that you're seeing right now?
Well, I think it does vary, right? I don't think there's like one blanket answer to what works best for everybody because it comes down to, like, in my consultations with our advisors, what do you want to accomplish with your marketing the most? Do you want to use it to connect with your current clients? Like client events are great for that. And then we can talk about other ways that you can make sure you're staying connected to your clients. Who are those clients? And, how do you want to, how do they prefer to communicate with you? Make sure we're meeting that need. Are you looking to do more prospecting? And so that might be a different approach. And then it's connecting the dots. Like when you talk about client events, a lot of advisors do client events. And I think that's great. I would never say don't do client events. They're not relevant anymore. They certainly are. It goes back to what I was saying before about the in-person connection being the most valuable. But I would say think about what do you do after that? What do you do after your client event? If you have a Google profile, if you're allowed to have that where you are, then use that opportunity to send an email out right afterwards to everybody saying, hey, I hope you enjoy working with us. Write us a review because we've seen an uptick in 5-star reviews written by clients who've recently attended an event. You're top of mind. They're feeling grateful for you. What are you doing in that space? Or what are you doing if it's a prospecting event to connect with that person on social media and continue to nurture that relationship? So I think the lowest hanging fruit opportunity is to look at things like that. Like, what are you doing today, such as client events? And how do you just expand that to be a little bit more robust.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, I love that. I'm thinking more tactically. So I'm thinking about the advisor or the person listening who's like, yes, I get it. I'm sold. Like I want to get in the game or I'm in the game. I just like want to make sure I'm making the most like maximum use of my time and energy in this space. In your opinion, Sarah, what are the let's call it like 1 to 3 things that if I were asking you with like my notepad out going, okay, what should I be doing? What would you tell me?
Yes, this is, I'm going to answer it specifically for LPL advisors with, again, my compliance caveat that you want to
Yes.
talk to your own compliance team and find out what you're able to do there. But what I tell our advisors to do is first and foremost, sit down and develop personas. The number one, like the clients that you work with today that you would most want to duplicate. And I would add to that their heirs because you want to continue creating longevity for your practice and set yourself up for future success. You have to make sure you're also talking to their heirs and the next generation. So create those personas to determine who am I trying to connect with? Who is this marketing for? The second thing I would suggest is sit down and make a plan. If let's say, because again, at LPL, we can do videos and people love video, but sometimes it's like, oh, I sat down and I made one, check the box, and then they don't come back to it and they don't have a plan to be consistent
Mhm.
with it. And as we know, consistency is key when it comes to marketing success. So sit down and make a plan. It could be for 6 months, you could do it for 3 months at a time, whatever works for you and think about with my target audience and personas in mind, what do they care about and how can I add value there? How can I provide education, help, entertainment, fun, whatever it is to address their needs and connect with those individuals? And then execute that plan, whether it's sending out newsletters, video content I'm very passionate about, maybe adding a social platform. When you think about that next gun investor, a lot of them are on Instagram. So if you're able to be on Instagram and you're not using it today, consider adding a platform, meet them where they are. But I think it just gets started with knowing and what is a
I love it. So, to summarize what you're saying, define your ideal clients, your avatars, make a plan for how you're going to play in this space and stick
and
to
stick
it.
to it.
And I
And
love
I
the
love it.
idea. Oops, I'm hearing an echo on my end. Okay, it went away. I love the idea of just simple. Like start somewhere and then you'll look back a few months and then you'll say, okay, I did that. Can I add in something? Can I layer in something? I do think video is important because, going back to AI as well, like I think there's something that it's nice to see your voice in see your face and hear your voice, and including like pictures or video or some points about your personal life and opinions, like all of that stuff does really well. And prospects care to see those things.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times when it comes to video, we overthink it.
100%.
You, like I said, you are experts and your voices aren't out there enough. And so if you just think about it in like 15 to 30-second increments, right? Just little snappable videos, just little tidbits. I call them your broken record topics. It's the things you say over and over again anyway to your clients and family members are probably sick of hearing you say that in a video because there are people.
Fantastic. I love it. You pretty much just eliminated all excuses and barriers to entry, which is amazing. It's really true though. It's like you have something to say, just get your phone out and say it, and it's not going to be perfect, but that doesn't matter. You don't need production, like professional production to do this.
I was just on social media the other day where I get a lot of my ideas and inspiration from who, and if not now, when. And I think that applies to this conversation too. If you're not going to be out there, someone else will. And if you're waiting,
That's a good one. I love it. Yeah, I love as marketers, like we have our little one-liners and our little analogies. You're like, oh, I'm adding that to mine. It's great. Yes, I know. It's good. Look, always refining your material, right? Okay, last question we'll end with, and then we'll move to a quick lightning round. Do you think it's possible to succeed without investing anything into online presence, digital mediums, and social media? Do you think those advisors who will not invest at all there, do you think it's possible that they'll survive and succeed in the business in the next generation?
possible, yes. Likely, I would say no. I mean, really, truly, we know that 81% prefer, saying before, about having a plan to communicate and connect with them now. And so, what those 81% of next gen millionaires will do is what we've talked about. They're going to leave, they're going to go online, and they're going to seek out financial priorities for an advisor to stay relevant in this industry. Is don't lose that business hold on to those millennials, and two, we have a strong digital presence so that as they're fleeing their parents' financial advisor and turning new advisors, starts with preparing yourself now. You don't want to wait 20 years because by that point, like I said, someone else.
You're going to be hurting 20 years from now if you don't start. Yeah. That's the other thing too, is like the more you just start now, the more you're going to accelerate where you'll be in 6 months from now, a year. And then it's going to get even crazier as more time goes on.
Okay, just one thing I'll add before you even find out what you're able. Think about how you can work within those parameters. And then if for some reason you feel like I can't, like I want to do, think about where can you go that can offer those opportunities. They like it.
I love it. That's a perfect note to end on. And I would agree with what you said. Okay, let's do some lightning round. So, what is some marketing advice that you do not subscribe to?
Quantity over quality. Sometimes people will advise you, like, you have to have 20 posts a day in order to be seen and be relevant. I don't agree. I think just focus on really high quality content and you will be perceived as more.
That's great advice. What is one thing every advisor should do this week to improve their marketing?
Create those 100% that we talked about. Don't have them already. Sit down.
Love it. What is one tool that you cannot live without? It's anything. Yeah.
We immediately share it out. We add all of our emojis and all those things that make it feel like authentically us. I think everything's in the palm of your hand.
It's pretty like telling whenever, and I'm a person who like regularly detaches from my phone. Like every Sunday, my phone, I want nothing to do with it. So like I have really healthy, really like intentional practices around it. But every time I'm not planning on, like my phone dies or the Wi-Fi's out or something, it's crazy how that makes me feel. I'm like, no, I'm way too dependent on this thing. But to that point, that's the tool that we use for everything.
Yes, I feel that anxiety. I wish I had your discipline to put it down but yes, I feel your anxiety.
Yes, it's not good. So when you're not building marketing strategy and serving advisors, what does like life look like for you in San Diego?
It's hard to complain about life in San Diego. It's pretty great. I live not far from the beach. I have a little dog, so we just get outside and enjoy.
It's the only place. So I'm a Colorado girly, born and raised. I've lived here my whole life, but San Diego is like the only place I've been, other than Paris or Tuscany, that I'm like I would live here. It's only San Diego because it's amazing.
It's a trap though too, because once you get here, you never want to leave. I want to stay here forever.
Of course not. That sounds lovely. I love it. So last question. Who is somebody else that I should have on the show?
Or maybe I'll recommend someone in the.
Yes, I'd love that recommendation. And then, yeah, anyone else who you think could add value to the listeners. I do think that'd be a good one to have a compliance person on. Yeah, but yeah, that'd be great. Well, Sarah, so everyone listening, make sure you find Sarah on LinkedIn. Any other places or that you would direct people to connect with you or LP?
Definitely connect with you on LinkedIn. Thank you for that. I'd love to have all of you kind of in my network there because you never know who in your network might create an opportunity. Don't forget that. So connect with as many people as you can. And then you can also follow LP. We have new advertisements and brand campaigns out in the marketplace. So that's kind of fun to see how we're positioning LP, promoting our firm to end investors for the first time. And with my experience at Capital One, and watching Capital One launch their brand a long time ago, it's kind of fun to watch LPL do the same thing right now. So definitely check that out. And as I mentioned, if you are looking, I feel like you could expand those capabilities and sales. So I'm always willing to talk to folks from a completely confidential point of view and share any.
Yeah, that's really kind. Thank you. I will make sure to link your LinkedIn in the show notes. And every time I use my Capital One and I see those commercials with cute little Jennifer Gardner, I'm going to think of you, Sarah.
Wow.
Yes, it's so good. Well, hey, thank you so much for this conversation. I really appreciate your time and your generosity. And I have some takeaways from this conversation. And I'm really, I know the listeners will as well. And I loved the concept of just like this was so practical and you can get started today and why this matters, why this is important. So many good takeaways. Thank you, Sarah. Hey, thanks so much for listening to the show. If this conversation resonated with you or you learned something new, make sure you follow the podcast so you don't miss out on future episodes. And do me a favor, like and subscribe and share this episode with a friend. comment on anything that you want to see or hear more of in the future as well. You can also stay connected by subscribing to the Wonder Weekly newsletter and connect with me, Emily, on LinkedIn at Emily Armstrong or Instagram, Emily Armstrong 2.0, for more insights on building modern client service firms. Until next time, keep on adapting, modernizing, and growing beyond referrals.